Welcome to Farm to Stable, a science-based equine nutrition podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nettie Liebert. I'm a lifelong horse person and professional equine nutritionist with the goal of helping horses and their humans create balanced diets to set them up for success, no matter what age, discipline, or circumstance. Disclaimer, the information discussed here is based on current scientific research and is for educational purposes only. Every horse's individual needs vary. This is not a substitute for veterinary medicine or nutrition consultation. Hello and welcome to another episode of Farm to Stable. I'm your host, Dr. Nettie Liebert. And this episode, we're going to talk about transport weight loss in horses. Why, you might ask? Well, recently I've had a couple of conversations with people and actually have done a consultation that brought up this concern of weight loss in horses that are traveling for competition. So it's a relatively common issue, and I thought it was one that warranted a little bit of attention, especially as here in North America, we're coming into spring, and for a lot of people, the competition season is starting to ramp up. So why might weight loss occur in a horse being transported? Well, there's a number of reasons. Stress, for example, a bad driver. Yes, if you are an inexperienced driver or just not good at driving a truck and trailer, or one that doesn't consider that you have a live animal back there, that can stress a horse out. High temperature or humidity can increase sweat and water loss. Horses that don't like to drink on the trailer. I have one of those who doesn't like to drink on a trailer or at a show or anywhere, or at least he used to back in those days. They may not eat as much forage on the trailer. Some eat like no problem. Others don't. And there may be increased water content of the feces, like a loose stool or a diarrhea. Trailering does make some horses nervous. And what happens when they're nervous? They poop, and sometimes that stool is loose or does have more water in it. Now, when we talk about transporting horses and weight loss, generally speaking, I'm not talking about going to your local horse show that's maybe 30 minutes or an hour away, or if you're going to a park for a trail ride that's near your house, something like that. I'm talking about longer term travel that may be 10 to 24 hours, or even a horse that's getting on an airplane for 6 hours or more. So if you're thinking, oh my goodness, I take my horse to my trainers every week, is he going to lose weight? There are some other things that may affect transport, but probably not weight loss so much. We're just going to stick to weight loss in this episode this week. But let's talk about what happens. Again, for those shorter trips, not likely to have significant weight loss. So it probably has very little effect on the horse in that regard. That said, hydration is still a major factor to consider, whether your horse is on the trailer for 30 minutes or 24 hours. So studies of horses that have been transported either by road or air show that their weight loss can average 2 kilograms, that's 4.4 pounds, per hour. Now, you may think, well, my horse weighs 1,400 pounds. That's not significant. But if you think about, multiply that times how many hours they're traveling, and you can get into changes in body condition scores pretty quickly. There was another study of horses in California that were transported for about 24 hours, and they showed a 6% loss of body weight immediately after they got off the trailer. Now, they recovered about 3% within the following 24 hours, and I'll break that down in a minute. So the regain was really attributed to rehydration. The rest is probably due to a loss of ingesta and water that's sitting in the cecum in the large intestine, because remember, fermenting hay and forage can sit in that cecum sometimes for 3 days. And if things are moving quickly and stress is happening, they may have just lost all of that. And if they're not eating as much forage during transport, you see where I'm going with this. So let's put those percentages into numbers you can probably wrap your head around. So if you have an 1,100-pound horse or 500 kilograms, a 6% loss in body weight is about 66 pounds or 30 kilograms. That is just over one step on the Hennigy body condition scale. This is not a weight loss diet. So if you have an overweight horse, the answer is not to put them on a trailer and drive them around for 24 hours to get them to lose weight. So just disclaimer there, that is not the point of this. The regaining of 3% of that body weight within 24 hours, again, is about 33 pounds or about 15 kilograms. So half of that initial loss. Again, the remaining loss is probably due to those other factors like decreased forage intake or an elimination of some of that ingesta and water that's sitting in the large intestine. And it can take the horse several days, perhaps a week or more, to recover that lost weight. And I'll put those references for those studies in the show notes. Now, what about flying? Now, most of us are not putting our horses on airplanes, but in higher level or international competition, it is very common for horses to get on a plane and fly somewhere for those international competitions. And on an airplane, horses can experience what's called insensible water loss. Now, this is not exclusive to air travel. It just sort of sets up an ideal environment for what's called insensible water loss. So what that means is when the air is dry, there's low humidity, even if the ambient temperature is ideal, which could be between about 15 and 17 degrees Celsius or 59 to 63 degrees Fahrenheit, that dry air will pull the moisture out of the skin. Now, you may have experienced this on a flight yourself. If you're on an airplane and all of a sudden, maybe your face, your hands feel tight, maybe your eyes feel dry. So during or after that flight, you just may feel more dried out than normal. Now, there's not much that can prevent this from happening, but there are some things you can do to prepare. And this is in general. So prior to long transport, and again, some of this is going to sound familiar to getting your horse ready to work in hot, sweaty conditions, right? So by long transport, I mean 1 or 2 days by road or flights over 6 hours. Now, also take into consideration changes in time zones. If you're going more than 3 to 4 time zones, if you've ever flown across the country or to another continent, you know that this can mess with you a little bit. If the climate is different here, a number of people in the Northeast United States travel south for the winter to compete, and you go from a very cold climate to a very warm one, and horses need time to adapt to that as well. Travel internationally may mean a different source of feed. So again, another consideration, something the horse may or may not like as much, but they do need time to adjust, and they do need time for their digestive systems to get used to that new feed. Remember, you can't just all of a sudden put several pounds or kilograms of feed in front of that horse if they're unfamiliar with that type of feed. So all of these things need to be thought about. So prior to long transportation, weigh your horse. We've said that a few times in this space. So if you don't have a scale, I recommend the Healthy Horse app. A weight tape is okay if that is all you have access to. Ideally, you have a scale that's calibrated, but most of us don't. So we need to use some other kind of measurement. But a scale, the Healthy Horse app, a weight tape is okay. It's the least accurate in my experience, but at the very least, it will help you measure any change in the horse's body weight. Ensuring proper hydration. So as we've said before with getting ready for competition, offering electrolytes 2 or 3 days before, mixed in with the feed, along with plenty of fresh water and forage to get that horse all hydrated up before getting on the transport vehicle. Ease up training. Allow that horse to conserve some energy. Light hacking, stretching exercises, a good walk, all of these things will help the horse conserve energy for the energy that it takes to stand on a trailer or to balance on a plane. So it's not passive. Horses are actually working to balance while they're being transported. So allow them to save up their energy. Now, if you're shipping your horse commercially, you can ask the company about how they manage horses on the trip. How often do they stop? How often do they offer water? Can you provide your own water if you have a horse that's a fussy drinker? Now, if you're driving yourself, hopefully you have learned to drive a truck and trailer. Practice with no horses. It is not a job for beginners. I've been driving my own truck and trailer for years, and I have no interest and desire in driving from New York to Florida on my own, at least not with a horse in the back. So I'm not going to take that on. Some people will, and that's fine. And if they're experienced and they're good drivers and they understand that they're hauling a live animal back there who is balancing and you can't weave in and out of traffic, you want to brake slow, turn slow and wide, accelerate slowly, avoid the sudden starts and stops when possible. Those are just some beginner tips. And it does take practice. Ask for help too. If you plan to travel yourself or drive your own horse, it's okay. Learn, take some time and do it. Now, during transport, a lot of the things may seem obvious, but it's helpful to provide forage. Now, one tip, you can soak the forage, soak it with water in that hay net to add some amount of water. Just keep in mind that if you are traveling during the summer or warmer months, you want to check that forage to make sure it doesn't get moldy or musty or it doesn't sit too long. So you might have to change it out. But if you are soaking the forage and keeping it damp, it's just a way to get a little bit more moisture into your horse. Providing water can also be a challenge during transport, but you want to bring along some water from home, of course, stopping at least every few hours to offer a drink every 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. There are some ways to hang buckets in trailers, but you want to make sure that you do it carefully because spilling is a risk. You don't want floors to become wet or slippery, and you don't want the horse to get a halter caught on any hanging apparatus on the bucket. So that one can be a little bit tricky, but it can be done. Just use caution when you do it. So when you're planning your trip, determine, can you stop overnight? Do you have a friend maybe halfway along your route where you could stop and your horse could rest and lay down? Or is there an extended rest period that's an option? If not, and many times there isn't, just plan your breaks accordingly. Can the horse lower his head even without coming off the trailer? Because I don't know about you, but I have had to stop at a rest stop with my truck and trailer, and the last thing I'm doing is taking my horse off that trailer on a rest stop by a highway, which is definitely not recommended. So if you can lower the chest bar perhaps on a trailer and let your horse put his head down and clear the respiratory system, maybe that's one thing you could incorporate into your rest breaks. Good ventilation in a trailer is key. Airflow all around the body. Trailers may differ, everything from stock trailers, slant trailers, front load, they're all a little bit different. So if you have questions about how the trailer is designed for ventilation, you can talk to the manufacturer and just ask them what is optimum. And in this, you want to be careful not to over blanket or over rug your horse. It's better for the horse to be a little bit cooler than to get hot and sweaty. I have made this mistake myself when I thought it was very chilly outside and I put a sheet or a light blanket on my horse and it turned out he was way too hot. So I have been there. I'm with you. I've made that mistake. So it's better to be a little bit cooler than to let them get too hot. Now, you finally made it where you need to go. You're off the plane, you're off the road. What do? One of the first things you're going to do is weigh your horse again using the same method that you did prior to transport. Note any differences. And again, you don't necessarily need to do this if you're going to a show that's maybe 30 minutes from your stable. You can, of course, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But for these long-term trips specifically, you want to watch the weight. And then you know about how much your horse needs to gain back. So recovery of weight after transport isn't quite the same as recovery of weight after exercise. After that long trip, horses need time to recover and to rest. And as I said earlier, it can take up to a week to fully regain that lost body mass, at least 24 hours to fully rehydrate. There have been studies done on that. To allow the horse to regain at least 50% of that lost mass before resuming anything more intense than hand walking or tack walking. Now, generally, if you're pulling your horse off a trailer after a 24-hour trip, I hope you're not saddling up to go for a ride. But again, allowing them to rest and lie down, stretch out in a paddock, something like that, weighing them again the next day, 24 hours later, to see if any of that weight has returned. And then, once you arrive at your destination, just plan for a few days of very light exercise before returning to intense training. Now, remember that horses lose fitness very, very slowly. So a few light days in a fit horse should not derail a training program. It's more important that your horse gains back the water and the hydration and everything they need so that when it comes time for you to ask them to perform, they can give you their best. So as in everything, part of good management is just to plan that trip, plan in some days of recovery before you need to start ramping things up again. So I hope this has provided you some interesting information about transport and horses. I do want to note weight loss is not the only thing. There are a number of other things that can happen physiologically during transport. This time we only focused on weight loss. But if you have questions on that or you want to hear a podcast on that topic a little more in depth, just send an email over to equinenutritionphd@yahoo.com and I will get on that for you. In the meantime, enjoy the warmer weather here in the Northern Hemisphere. Hopefully it's warming up where you are. Enjoy time with your horses, and we'll see you next time on Farm to Stable. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Farm to Stable, a science-based equine nutrition podcast. Please share and subscribe if you found the content interesting. And if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, send it to equinenutritionphd@yahoo.com.